Hey, so I found something this season, this Passover season, that I never saw before, and it took me 20 years before I saw this. So some of you may be familiar with how Jesus washed the disciples' feet. Just last night, I took part in the New Covenant service where we took the wine and the bread to represent Yeshua's blood, and the bread to represent his body. In addition to that, we also do a foot washing service. And just like myself, many of us are familiar with that teaching us how to be humble and how Yeshua came here to submit his body for us and how he served us in the way that he died for us. Well, I saw something this year that I never saw before. So if you go to the book of John, chapter 13, and I'm going to go right into verse 3. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. So I want to stop there. Something I never thought about was that after Jesus washed all 12 disciples' feet, do you know how dirty he was? We only think of our feet being washed, but he kept taking on disciple after disciple after disciple, their dirt off of their feet. Do you know how dirty he was? What does that remind you of? That he bore our sins, all of our sins. He took them on himself. And I had never thought of that before. Again, I thought of how it related to me, but that night, just how dirty he was and what that represented. So I want to pick it up in verse 4. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing. We'll get back to that. And wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Verse 8. "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Then Lord, Simon Peter replied, "Not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Now, all of this I'm used to. Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. Now here, verse 12 is what I want to highlight. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. I want to go back to verse 3. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he came from God and he was returning to God. Well, what happened? What do we know that happened is, yes, that he came from God. He lowered himself lower than the angels and became like man. And we also know that when he bore all of our sins, when he took on all of our sins, he died for our sins. What happened after that? After he was resurrected, he returned to the Father and was glorified and sat back down at the right side of Yahweh. So, right here, believe me, I'm going to stumble on my words, but this is very exciting to me because I never saw it before. So here we have, you can read it yourself, but here we have Jesus got up. He took off his clothes. What did he do? His clothing. What did he do? He took off his glory to come down for us. He took off his glory to come down for us. And then he girded himself. So stay with me. He girded himself with a towel and he took on all of their dirt, all of our sins. And then when we go to 12, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes. So there you go. Stay with me here. I don't think I'm reaching. I heard this from someone else and I thought they were reaching. But then I started reading it and poof, it just made sense to me. So verse 12, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. What a beautiful metaphor. When John wrote this later, it's like divine poetry. So we have Jesus shedding his glory, taking that clothing off, taking on our sins, that dirt. Then he put back the glory. And then, verse 12, he returned to his place, just like Yeshua, after he bore our sins and after he was resurrected, he returned to heaven glorified. And I just got chills when I said that, because if for 20 years I have taken part in the foot washing, and that never made sense to me until now. And that's beautiful. And I just wanted to share it with you. Happy Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread.